This is a Fox News alert. The Obama administration finally talking to Mexico about the detention of our U.S. Marine, Sergeant Andrew Tahmooressi. Today, the State Department confirming Secretary of State John Kerry raised the issue of the jailed Marine during this week's meetings in Mexico City. On the record has been investigating this case from the start, from here in the United States and on the ground in Mexico, because we want to know, but the State Department has not told us what Secretary Kerry said in Mexico, to whom he said it, and what demands, if any, that he made. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton joins us. Good evening, sir.
Glad to be with you.
Any thoughts about what Senator Kerry said in Mexico, to whom, and what would you say if you were there?
Well, this is a very significant step and a significant admission by the State Department. I'm kind of surprised they acknowledged it publicly, because I think it now moves this case to an entirely different and much more appropriate level. You know, the basic function of the State Department, if it can't do anything else, is to help protect Americans overseas. You know, forget international agreements that get you Nobel Peace Prizes. A foreign ministry has to protect its citizens. And now I think the State Department has an obligation to say, do they believe that Tahmooressi is being held unjustly, illegally, unfairly? Because if so, then there's a special obligation on state to do something about it. It's not just having consular access to a guy who did something wrong and who's in jail. That can happen to lots of people and does. But here you've got a government that is obviously handling this case for political reasons, whatever Mexico has in mind. Now I think the State Department has an obligation to take this to the next level and to get serious about it after 6 weeks.
How much leverage does the United States have, if any, in dealing with Mexico on this?
Well, I think it has very significant leverage. You know, Mexico is the recipient of a lot of American tourist dollars, and if the United States put out an advisory or a travel warning saying, we advise American citizens not to go to Mexico because they're unsafe and subject to arbitrary arrest and detention by Mexican authorities, that would have a pretty significant impact in all the tourist areas around Mexico we know so well. And I think that's the most direct step the department could take if, in fact, they believe that Tahmooressi telling the truth and that he's being unjustly held. And that's why I think now the next step is to hear from the State Department. Did he violate Mexican law? Did he do something that justifies this? It's hard for me to believe anybody could say that with a straight face, but I think the State Department's got to own up to this now.
Well, I tell you, the thought that you could accidentally go to Mexico to me sounded actually quite absurd before I went down and actually drove it, and I saw that actually it was the turn I would have made, because when he made that left turn that ended him up in Mexico, that also was in the direction of San Diego. That's the turn I would have made, and there were no options once you made that turn.
Well, there's no argument here, it seems to me, that when he got to the Mexican checkpoint, he said, I don't really want to be here, and by the way, I've got firearms in my truck. The idea that somehow he tried to drive through the checkpoint, you know, this is all trumped up after the fact. But that's why the easier course for the State Department, honestly, would have been to have said, well, we don't comment on ongoing diplomatic negotiations. But now they have acknowledged that our Secretary of State raised this, presumably with his Mexican counterpart, Foreign Secretary Meade. And if he thought it was important enough to raise it, certainly implies he thinks it's illegal or unfair what they're doing to Tahmooressi. And if that's the case, as I say, the stakes are much higher now.
And as a side, I should tell you that his lawyer has tried to obtain the video of him right at the border, because apparently they have that video, because there was some suggestion they said that he tried to rush through or something at the border point, but they've been unable to get that video. That hasn't been produced, no matter the best efforts. So, you know, if they've got that video, they need to show it. Ambassador, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And the On the Record team is just back from Mexico. We traveled there with Sergeant Tahmooressi mother, Jill Tahmooressi. But before we went, as I noted, we have to admit we did not think it was possible to accidentally end up on the Mexican side of the border. But then we changed our minds. That was after we retraced the identical route that the Marine took. And here's what we discovered. Confusing signs, loaded rifles, and the Mexican border, a dangerous combination.
He got lost, made a wrong turn, and ended up in Mexico.
Sergeant Tahmooressi took a turn that landed him in a Mexican prison. On the record, hit the streets to see just how easy it is to make the mistake. Look at the signs. It says Mexico only. That's not an illuminated sign, and the only is rather faded. The other sign over here, which says Mexico only, no USA, there's graffiti over the no USA in the Mexico only. But here's the confusing part, is that you'd be inclined to want to go that direction and go to San Diego, since that's the direction of San Diego. If he had intended to go to Mexico, you would expect that he would look for a road that would go in that direction. But it wasn't just a wrong turn. Once he made that turn, Sergeant Tahmooressi says he couldn't turn back. So I got behind the wheel to investigate his claim. We're coming up on the right of where Sergeant came out of his parking spot and then where he made his turn. You can see to the right this road is looping right onto the freeway. This is where he came out, over to the right. And once at the border, it went downhill fast. I'm staying in the left lane because I want to return to the USA, and you can see the Return USA sign. And so I can stay in the left lane, but he's over here to the right. He can't get over here to the left lane I'm in so he can make the U-turn. This is the only lane that you can make this U-turn in, but you can see how he's got to cross in it, which would be impossible, all these barricades.
Stop where it says 10.
So this is where the U-turn is, right here. I'm making the U-turn, but he couldn't get over that. He'd have to cross over all these lanes, and cars are going. It's late at night. It's dark. And so I've got the option. I'm making the last choice, but he couldn't get over to this point. So you can see how impossible it was for him to get to where I am, making the U-turn. So I'm making the U-turn to go back to the USA, but he could not.
My problem is I crossed the border by accident, and I have 3 guns in my truck, and they're trying to take my guns from me.
So you're in Mexico?
Yeah.
There's nothing I can help you with then, sir. I do apologize. You're not on American soil anymore. I can't really help you.
Sergeant Tahmooressi found himself surrounded by Mexican customs. He told them he had guns in his car, guns that are illegal in Mexico. Only on the record obtaining these receipts, they are proof Sergeant Tahmooressi legally owned and purchased these guns in the United States. And now, the U.S. Marine is languishing in a Mexican prison on weapons possession. But he is not charged with weapons smuggling.
He is being formally accused for possession and not for weapons smuggling, which is a completely different charge.
Mexico doesn't think he was smuggling, and that's a big deal. Smuggling means you want to bring the guns in to sell them, but possession could be a mistake.
He's not a criminal. He made a mistake.
So Sergeant Tahmooressi, first put behind bars at La Mesa State Penitentiary.
He leapt over a huge wall, scaled over a wall, and obviously activated the security protocols. He was placed in a special cell, it's my understanding, and then he hurt himself.
He deliberately hurt himself.
Yes.
He didn't hurt himself in the jumping.
No.
He hurt himself.
Yes.
He really tried.
Yes, apparently it was with a light bulb.
And they chained him as a result of that, too?
Well, he was chained, but my understanding is that he had some sort of bandages so he wouldn't be hurt, because their concern was that he might hurt himself. Or he might hurt someone else.
La Mesa Prison transferred Sergeant Tahmooressi to El Hongo. That's the prison he's being held in. That's one of the more modern prisons here in Mexico. He was previously held at another prison, which was much more dangerous prison, but he has been transferred now to this prison. On the record, went to the prison to interview Sergeant Tahmooressi, but at the gate, despite repeated attempts and promises, the prison turned us away. So then, after finally being provided pen and paper, Sergeant Tahmooressi sent a handwritten letter to the prison demanding the prison let us in.
He knew that you were outside waiting to come in, and he was highly disappointed that he wasn't able to share with you and with the American public and with the Mexican citizens his fight for freedom, and to explain exactly how we got lost at the border and to tell the truth about that night.
So Sergeant Tahmooressi wants to talk to us. His mother Jill wants us to talk to him. We want him to tell his story to you. But the Mexican prison is playing games, making false promises, and preventing Sergeant Tahmooressi from being able to speak to you.
We're not going to arrest Americans and make, bad turns and, put them in Mexican jail.
Then just one day after returning from Mexico, the United States Marine Corps told Jill Tahmooressi her son Andrew must report for duty on June 14th or face punishment if he doesn't show up.
I was so worried because it said if he didn't show up, he would possibly have a dishonorable separation and lose his VA benefits. So I did reach out to the U.S. Consulate Services in Tijuana, Mexico, and Mr. Whitaker intervened, and I did receive an email back from Mr. Whitaker that said that his orders for mustard would be excused.
The United States excusing a Marine from training while he sits in a Mexican prison cell. We don't know when he'll be released or even if he'll be released, but on the record, it's on the case. And Sergeant Tahmooressi had recently moved from Florida to San Diego to go to the VA hospital there. Now, we spoke with Sergeant Tahmooressi home state senator, Senator Marco Rubio, about the Marine's detention. Senator, what do you make of the fact that a U.S. Marine is sitting in prison in Mexico awaiting some sort of judicial action?
Well, first of all, it's not the first time this has happened, unfortunately. We've, of course, been in contact with his family, with the State Department, trying to get more information on this. We're deeply concerned about it. As I said, it's not the first time this has happened now. I think it's a caution to people, but about being careful near that border area because of these sorts of outrageous acts. But we have been in contact with the State Department. We have asked them to make it a priority in their communications with the Mexican government.
You know, Senator, I thought it was actually a preposterous story. I thought, how in the world can you accidentally drive into Mexico? Then we actually went down there. We retraced his steps, and the way the roads are designed are almost absolutely bizarre. If you want to go home to San Diego, you think you turn left and head north. Instead, you turn left and you loop around. You end up right in Mexico without any options. This is so poorly designed. And now this two-term veteran who went to he did 2 tours in Afghanistan. Now he's sitting in that prison.
That's right, and like I said, we're deeply concerned. We've been in contact with his family, with the State Department, and we're hoping this thing has a happy resolution here very soon.
What is the State Department saying to you, though? I can tell you what they're saying to us.
They're somewhat limited. They say they can't give us too much information without the permission of the family. They said they've communicated with Mexican authorities and made this a priority. Beyond that, we haven't heard too much yet.
All right, and I know he's from Florida, so he's one of your constituents. I can tell you that his mother will give you permission, and I know, and we went down to the prison to talk to him. He gave us permission, and then the prison said that he needed to do it in writing, and then they wouldn't get him a pen and paper. So the prison's doing everything to get in our way.
Yeah, I don't think that the Mexican prison system is an ideal model to begin with, and so we're very, very concerned about this case, and I'm glad that you've shown some light on it.
What should President Obama do?
Well, I think he should call on the authorities over there, including the president of the country, Peña Nieto, and make this a priority. Again, I mean, they're going to argue they've got their own judicial system that has to work through there. But this gentleman, quite frankly, doesn't fit the profile of anyone who's dangerous. This sounds like an accident that occurred. I hope he's treated fairly. I hope he's back in Florida soon.
Well, I understand they have a judicial system, but one thing they could do as sort of a courtesy, since we give them a lot of money and we do a lot of business with them, they could at least accelerate the process. Because I will tell you, any prosecutor, any judge looking at this, looking at those roads, looking at those signs, and looking at the fact that when he got to the border, he made a phone call saying that he had accidentally gone in there, and he told the authorities about the guns that he could lawfully possess in the United States. He told the border police, and they still picked him up. But anybody looking at that would cut him loose.
Again, we should make that a priority in making those points. And beyond that, I would say that you're right. We should use our diplomatic influence to ensure that they know this matters to us. And I hope the White House will do that.
And we, on the record, want to thank you because the hashtag Marine held in Mexico has now reached over 19 million people. We asked you to apply pressure, and boy, you came through. You did. We don't know if there's a connection, but we are obviously thrilled that the Obama administration is finally talking to Mexico about our jailed Marine, Sergeant Andrew Tahmooressi. By the way, it is noted that many of you are disgusted about the Marine's detention. Here's just a sampling of your tweets. Doug tweeted this: a Mexican who mistakenly enters the U.S. can get benefits. An American mistakenly enters Mexico and gets imprisoned. And Bill tweeted, by signing this message, you will send a letter to all of Congress. He included a link to a petition. And Ernie tweeted, Marine held in Mexico, Andrew Tahmooressi, don't vacation in Mexico till he's free. And even my good friend Sean Hannity tweeted, locked up in Mexico. I get the latest on Greta wires, mission free, a U.S. Marine imprisoned in Mexico. So maybe, just maybe, your outrage, your actions help. So thank you. And remember, he's not out yet, so let's keep applying the pressure. And joining us, our political panel, ABC News political director Rick Klein, the National Journal's Ronald Fournier, and Washington Examiner chief political correspondent Byron York. Rick, first to you. Senator Kerry talking, or Secretary Kerry, rather, we're talking in Mexico. What do you think?
I think Ambassador Bolton is right in pointing out that it's a major escalation for the Secretary of State to acknowledge through the State Department that they're having these conversations. I wouldn't expect them to put a lot of detail behind that, and I think that's going to be part of a complicated diplomatic dance. You can imagine what the conversation would be on the other side if this was a Mexican citizen in our judicial system. But I do think the conversation started, and I think that is significant. And if the Secretary of State is talking about it, it means that those conversations will continue, and we know where the U.S. comes down on this.
But don't you think it's amazing that it's been 6 weeks before you have a high-level U.S. protest about this? Now, the State Department says they visited him 11 times in prison. That's good. But it's 6 weeks with this American held for apparently no reason, and they haven't protested?
Although we don't know what has been happening behind closed doors in the last 6 weeks. I just like to say kudos to you and your team for going down there and shedding a light on this. and making it such a public event now. But we're still in the same position we were 6 weeks ago. These are always very complicated situations. This kind of thing doesn't happen infrequently. And the State Department is going to get him out, needs to get him out, and they have to do it in a way that does respect the fact that they have their internal politics and their judicial system. It may not happen as quickly as we want, but it's going to happen.
You know, it's not just them. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, look, I recognize that we have to respect the system of other countries. If someone would just look at this, I mean, this is not it's like just speed it up. He's been sitting there 6 weeks. If a prosecutor or a judge has sat down and looked at it, but that's 99% of the problem, because this isn't like a real complicated case.
Which makes you think there's something else going on here. And in this case, we know about the escape attempt. We know about the attempt to injure himself, and that could be a complicating factor internally. But this is now caught up in you'd imagine some kind of a political football, because this is on its face doesn't make sense that the Mexicans would be interested in detaining him.
And actually, he has PTSD. He's got some problems from his vehicle got hit by an IED. He'd actually gone to San Diego to a VA hospital, another topic, to get help.
I mean, this does appear to be a victimless crime in that sense. If there were some Mexican citizen who had been injured, who'd been hurt in this, I mean, it would make it a much, much different situation. But since you have this apparently accidental crossing, you have the voluntary admission that there are firearms in the car. And his family told you he was armed almost all the time. And this is something that seems to me that American officials could explain how much this means to us, and we want to get this straightened out.
Right. And it would have worked its way out on its own, very quietly. Both two neighbors, two allies would have tried to work this out very quietly. You and your team has done this family a service by raising it to this level where now the State Department is going to have to put a little bit more pressure on. In fact, you're putting pressure on the Mexican officials.
I don't know how many thousands of Americans are in Mexico or other prisons, but just think this was one mother. I mean, think of the people who go to prison accidentally in our country or any place and don't have a mother to put the spotlight on.
And we've had incidences like this before where it's had to be a spotlight to really put the pressure on both governments.
And in his case, you have it's an American who served in combat in Afghanistan in this crazy situation.
And who was actually seeking help because he's having troubles to San Diego to the VA, and that's why he was in San Diego and just had gone over to Tijuana like everybody. And, to me, it was notable is that if he'd spent the day in Mexico, the last thing he wanted to do was go get his car and drive back into Mexico, too. Anyway, panel, thank you. All right, well, this is criminal. Americans, veterans dying while waiting for health care. Congressman and Air Force vet Adam Kinzinger says it is time to act and throw people in jail. We're going to talk to him and Karl Rove about the VA scandal next. Plus, new